The passenger in my back seat had no head, just blood-soaked white clothes slumped against the leather, and I was alone on a pitch-black highway at 1 in the morning. What I saw that night didn't just end my career as a taxi driver, it shattered everything I thought I knew about the world. My name is David Williams, and this is the night that destroyed my life. If you've ever felt that primal fear that makes your blood run cold, hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video if you believe some roads should never be traveled after dark. And drop a comment telling me, would you have stopped for that passenger? Because what happened to me on the Northwood Highway is something no one should ever experience. Let's dive in. Brighton Hills was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone. Population barely 5,000. I lived there with my mother, my wife Emma, and our 2 kids, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6. Life was simple, hard, but simple. I was a taxi driver, had been for years. Started working for a private company back in 2014, but by 2018, I'd saved enough to buy my own car, a decent sedan, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Taking direct bookings meant more money in my pocket, and God knows we needed every penny. I was the only one bringing income into that house. But by early 2019, the bookings had slowed to a trickle. The financial pressure was crushing. The electricity bills, the school fees, the groceries, it all piled up like bricks on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Emma never complained, but I could see the worry lines deepening around her eyes. I needed work, any work. That's why when I got the call in May 2019 for a Saturday afternoon booking from Brighton Hills to Mountain Ridge City, I didn't hesitate. Mountain Ridge was a 3-hour drive on a good day. The fare would be substantial. I couldn't afford to say no. I arrived at the passenger's house around 1 in the afternoon. He was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, with his wife Laura and their 12-year-old son. As I loaded their luggage into the trunk, the man insisted I come inside for tea. Please, you must be tired from the drive over. Have some tea before we go. I glanced at my watch. Every minute counted when you were trying to get back before dark, but refusing hospitality seemed rude. I accepted. It was 1:30 by the time we finally hit the road. The drive started normally enough. The man sat up front with me while his wife and son occupied the back seat. We made small talk about the weather, about business. About an hour in, we stopped at a fuel station. The man stepped out to smoke, one of those long, deliberate cigarettes that people use to calm their nerves. As we approached a particular stretch of highway, the landscape changed. The trees grew denser, pressing in on both sides of the road like walls. The sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. A weathered sign appeared. Northwood Town, 5 miles. The man's entire demeanor shifted. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. David, this road, this area we're passing through, it's not safe at night. My hands tightened on the wheel. What do you mean? He glanced back at his wife, who was looking out the window, her son asleep against her shoulder. Strange things happen here after dark, things that can't be explained. Drivers who travel this highway late at night. He trailed off, shaking his head. What kind of things? I pressed. He cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable. Never mind. Just old stories, superstition probably. Forget I said anything. But I could see it in his eyes. He believed every word. We reached Mountain Ridge City around 7:30 in the evening. The sun was already setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. After I helped unload the luggage, the man pressed the fare into my hand, along with something extra. "That's for tea," he said. Then his expression grew serious. "Do yourself a favor. Find a hotel here. Stay the night. Drive back tomorrow morning when the sun's up." I shook my head, manufacturing a smile. "I appreciate the concern, but I've got another booking tomorrow morning. I need to get back." It was a lie. I had no booking. but I also had no money for a hotel room, and my family needed that extra cash more than I needed a comfortable bed. "Be careful," he said quietly, "especially through Northwood." At 8:30 p.m., I started the long drive home. The highway was nearly empty. Occasionally, a truck would roar past in the opposite direction, but otherwise, I was alone with my thoughts and the radio. I kept the volume low, listening to old songs that reminded me of better times. By midnight was setting in. My eyelids felt like they had weights attached to them. I spotted a small roadside cafe, one of those 24-hour places that survive on truck drivers and insomniacs. I pulled in, ordered black coffee, and splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom. The face staring back at me in the mirror looked older than its 36 years. 12:15 a.m. I was back on the road, the coffee doing its job, keeping me alert. Then I saw the sign again, Northwood Town. The moment I crossed into the town limits, something changed. The air itself felt different, thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. The streetlights were on, casting pools of sickly yellow light onto empty streets, but there was no one. No cars parked along the curbs, no dogs barking, no cats skulking through alleys. Nothing, just silence. Not the peaceful silence of a sleeping town, but an oppressive, unnatural quiet that made my ears ring. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. I pressed down on the accelerator, suddenly desperate to get through this place as quickly as possible. That's when I heard it. Thud. Something heavy hit the roof of my car with such force that the entire vehicle shook. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering against my ribs. The car skidded slightly before coming to a complete stop. I sat there for a moment, hands trembling on the steering wheel, trying to process what just happened. A branch? A large bird? I had to check. I stepped out into the cold night air, my breath forming small clouds. I walked slowly toward the back of the car, every horror movie I'd ever seen playing through my mind. Don't look, just get back in the car and drive. But I looked. There, lying on the asphalt behind my car, was a dead animal. I couldn't tell what kind. Maybe a dog, maybe something else. But its head was completely crushed, flattened as if someone had taken a massive rock and brought it down with all their strength. Blood pooled around it, black under the streetlights. My stomach lurched. I turned away, fighting the urge to vomit, and stumbled back to my car. I drove away without looking back, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. 1 mile, maybe 2. I was just beginning to convince myself that the worst was over when I saw him. A man standing directly under a streetlight, his arm raised in the universal gesture of someone needing a ride. He was wearing white clothes, a simple white shirt and pants. From a distance, he looked ordinary enough. I'd been hoping to pick up a passenger all night, someone to share the journey, to make the trip home profitable. And here was someone who needed help. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving. But I was a taxi driver. This was my job, and I needed the money. The man approached the car with slow, measured steps. When he reached the window, I could see his face, pale, expressionless, with dark eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Can you take me to Brighton Hills?" His voice was quiet, almost gentle.
I named my price. He nodded without hesitation. I gestured to the front passenger seat. "You can sit up here if you like." He didn't respond. Instead, he walked around to the back door, opened it, and slid into the back seat. Through my rear view mirror, I watched him settle in, his white clothes standing out starkly against the dark interior.
"Seatbelt," I said automatically, but he didn't move. I shrugged and started driving. We passed the last of the streetlights, and suddenly we were engulfed in absolute darkness. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the black, but beyond that, there was nothing. No moon, just an endless void pressing in on all sides. That's when the car started acting strange. The engine sputtered. Once, the smooth purr became a labored cough. I glanced at the dashboard. All the gauges looked normal, but the car was definitely slowing down. "No, no, no," I muttered, pressing harder on the accelerator. But it was no use. The engine's death rattle grew louder, and then I saw smoke beginning to seep from under the hood. Within seconds, the car died completely. We rolled to a stop in the middle of the highway, surrounded by darkness so complete it felt solid. "I'm sorry," I said to the passenger, my professional instincts kicking in despite my growing panic. "I don't know what's wrong. Let me check the engine." I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and stepped out. The hood was warm to the touch as I popped it open. Smoke billowed out, but when I examined the engine with my phone's light, I couldn't see any obvious problem. No leaks, no disconnected parts, nothing. Frustrated, I decided to check if the passenger might have any ideas. Maybe he knew something about cars. I turned to look through the back window. The passenger had no head. Where his neck should have connected to his head, there was nothing, just a ragged, bloody stump. His white clothes were soaked in blood, fresh blood that glistened in the dim glow of my phone's light. The shirt hung on a headless torso that somehow remained upright, sitting perfectly still in my back seat. My phone slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the asphalt. Time stopped. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. People didn't exist without heads. People didn't. The headless thing moved, just slightly, a subtle shift of the shoulders, as if it were preparing to stand. I ran. I didn't think, didn't grab my phone, didn't close the hood, didn't look back. I just ran down that dark highway, my lungs burning, my legs pumping, pure terror propelling me forward. The darkness was total, but I didn't care. I would rather run blind than stay one more second near that thing in my car. And then I heard them, heavy, impossibly fast, coming from behind me, running after me. I screamed. The sound tore from my throat, raw and primal, echoing into the darkness. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, faster than I thought possible, my heart threatening to explode from my chest. Up ahead, barely visible in the gloom, I saw lights, a building, salvation. It was an old monastery set back from the road, its windows glowing with warm golden light. I ran toward it, shouting, begging, pleading for help. The door burst open. People rushed out, monks in simple brown robes, their faces etched with concern. They grabbed me, pulled me inside, sat me down. Someone pressed a glass of water into my shaking hands. "Please," I gasped between ragged breaths. "There's something in my car. No head. It was chasing me."
An elderly priest knelt beside me. His face was weathered, his eyes kind but knowing, too knowing. "Breathe, my son," he said softly. "You're safe now. Nothing can harm you here." I told him everything. The passenger, the white clothes, the headless body, the footsteps chasing me. It all came pouring out in a confused, terrified rush. When I finished, the priest nodded slowly, as if I'd just confirmed something he already knew. "What you saw," he said carefully, "was not human. Not anymore."
He explained that many years ago, on that very stretch of highway, a man had been struck by a truck. The impact had been so severe that his head was completely severed from his body. The driver fled the scene and was never caught. The man's body was found hours later, but his head was never recovered. Since that day, the priest continued, his voice barely above a whisper, his spirit has wandered this road. He stands beneath the streetlights, waiting for someone to stop, anyone who picks him up. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Why?" I asked. "Why does he do this?"
The priest shook his head. Some spirits don't know they're dead. Others are trapped by the violence of their deaths, doomed to repeat their last moments forever. And some," he paused, "some are simply angry, looking for someone to share their fate." I spent the rest of the night in that monastery, in a small room with a hard bed and a single window that looked out onto the highway. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that headless passenger, blood dripping from his torn neck. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, the old priest found me. "Come," he said. We walked in silence down that highway. In the daylight, it looked completely ordinary, just another stretch of road through the countryside. My car sat exactly where I'd left it, hood still open, my phone lying on the ground beside it. The back seat was empty. No blood, no white clothes, no headless passenger. The priest closed the hood gently and gestured for me to try the engine. It started immediately. No smoke, no sputtering. It purred like it had never had a problem in its life. I looked at the priest, unable to speak. He placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Go home to your family, David, and never travel this road after dark again." I drove straight back to Brighton Hills, watching the sun climb higher in my rearview mirror. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Emma was already awake, making breakfast for the children. She took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. I tried to drive again. God knows I tried. But every time I got behind the wheel after dark, I would see him in the rearview mirror, that headless passenger, sitting perfectly still, waiting. Within 2 weeks, my family staged an intervention. They begged me to quit, to find another way. And eventually, I did. That was years ago. I've never driven professionally since that night. Some roads should never be traveled alone. Some passengers should never be picked up. If this story sent chills down your spine, smash that like button. Subscribe for more true horror stories that will make you question everything. And tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Drop your stories below. Until next time, stay safe out there. And whatever you do, never stop for the man in white clothes on the Northwood Highway.